This will be a response to Coughlan616, who can't just help it. He can't just help making apologies for Islam. Now, first off, he claims that there was only one Muslim terrorist attack in Europe in 2010, and like this is just like factually wrong. Like I didn't look very hard. Like I just saw this video today, and I thought, well, let's take a look at terrorist attack in Europe, and I found 6 just doing Google surfing. Okay, there's one. There was a Jewish teen stabbed in Paris by a Muslim yelling Allah Akbar. There was a Jewish man stabbed, and a synagogue was defaced in Strasbourg by Muslims. There were some Muslims who poured petrol on a French actress in Paris with the intent to burn her alive because she was in a play that was critical of Islam. Then there was a Muslim gang of 5 that beat a Sikh, how do you pronounce it? A Sikh shopkeeper in Huddersfield, England, or Britain or whatever. And there was a mother of 4 who was beheaded in an honor killing in North Rhine-Westphalia in Germany. And there was a woman beaten to death over an arranged marriage, and her daughter was beaten into a coma for resisting the marriage, and this was in Modena, Italy. So there's 6 right there. And hilariously, Coughlan cites an EU report, a European Union report. Oh, excellent, huh? And so I guess he thinks that the EU is some authority or something. Like, this is ridiculous. It's like citing a UN or a League of Nations report. They had a report. The General Assembly Council. It's just a glorified student body council. Okay, they lie, and you don't even have to look very hard at all. But I saw. But I did a search for this report, and it's being repeated all over, like the Huffington Post and all. Basically all the Muslim ball liquor websites, and of course just no checking at all. Like if you just did the barest amount of research, you would find, look, I just found 6, and that report said there's only 1, and so like wrong, and 6 in Europe. And now if you widen your scope to the world, you'll see Islam is much more terrible around the world. Anyway, yeah, the EU is like Hollywood. So anyway, that report is obviously wrong. I just found 6, just looking through France, Italy, and Germany, and I'm sure there are many more. And yes, these all occurred in 2010. But more importantly, Coughlan making a video like this, it totally misses the point. Totally misses the point. This is not really why Islam is threatening. Terror attacks are flashy, but that isn't and never was the real issue. Terror was just turned into a buzzword by Bush and his cronies so that they could dupe Americans into spending billions on a war that made him and his cronies millions, right? You get the taxpayer to spend billions and give your little group millions, right? It's horribly inefficient, except for the rats who get control of the state. 40% of Muslims in the UK want Sharia law, and 41% oppose Sharia law. And this is according to like a telegraph.co.uk article. And there was a polling company that did this. And you can read the article if you question the methods or anything. But what they found is that younger Muslims are actually more likely to support Sharia law than older Muslims. So they're getting more Muslim. They're getting more Islamic. So that's the threat of Islam there. Right? It's a political demographic threat. These people come in and then they vote in Sharia. And of course that 40%, that's while Muslims are still a pretty small minority in the UK. Okay? When they start becoming larger and larger populations, what they're going to have is they're going to have group reinforcement, because they're going to be around more Muslims who have the same ideas. They're not going to be as isolated. Of course, multiculturalism prevents the isolation of individuals. They allow these Muslims to go sequester off into their own communities. But the more you isolate someone from their old belief systems, the more you break down the old Islamic belief systems. Okay, so if you bring in like an individual Muslim, keep him in the UK for a bunch of years where he's separated from all the other Muslims, his Islamic thinking will probably break down. But when you have multiculturalism and allow them to sequester off, it allows them to reinforce. And of course, as you bring in more and more and more Muslims, they're going to become less and less isolated, and there's going to be more and more reinforcement. All right, so it's very likely, I view it as a certainty that it's going to go way over 50%, maybe to 70% of Muslims supporting Sharia law, and Muslims being something like half the UK's population. All right, even if you don't bring in any more, they're breeding too fast. So that's the real threat of Islam. The terror stuff is secondary, and the only reason people focus on it is because of George Bush and his, war. Yeah, that's it. To end the video, let's just get one thing straight. Separatists, as long as they're only killing government officials and or people who are vocally opposed to separatism, are not terrorists, okay? and you may think, well, that's a horrible, you're endorsing killing and stuff. Look, they're no more terrorists than if Finnish partisans were firing at Soviet policemen had the Soviets won the Winter War of 1939, or like Hungarian separatists trying to separate from the Warsaw Pact, which was basically run by the Soviets. Were they terrorists? They were killing Soviet policemen. They were trying to separate from the Soviet Union. Are they terrorists? Okay, so when the EU says that separatists committed X many terrorist attacks, well, that means nothing until we know who they killed. They just killed some average guy, doing grocery shopping, then okay, that's obviously reprehensible. But an act of state is an act of war, and forced association is the real terrorism. Like, imagine if Egypt, where 90% of all girls are circumcised, where women can't leave the country without their husband's permission, and where girls can't become judges. Okay, imagine if Egypt were a part of Britain. Okay, not like a colony, not a territory, but treated straight up as a part of Britain just as much as Northumberland or Kent. Okay? Wouldn't it make much more sense to separate Egypt and Britain? Okay? In our individual lives, we have separatism. Okay? We have separate private property plots. We shut out people we don't like. We don't want to be in our party. Okay? But apparently the political realm, in the political realm, separatism is not allowed. You're not allowed to separate. You're not allowed to opt out. Okay? And of course, states claim the entire planet, so the love it or leave it argument is bullshit. Like there's nowhere to go. Okay, so love it or leave it is not a valid argument. So, and what are the results of this denial of separatism? Well, the results are manifest.